Hello and welcome to the CITE View on CITE Online. My name is Leslie Moy. In today's program, we're discussing all things Starlink, and I'm joined in the studio by Mr. Willard Shoko, who is a Starlink researcher and also a consultant, and want to discuss why having a ground station in Bulawayo will benefit the city economically. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie, for having me here.
Okay, let's start right at the top. Starlink has been operating in Zimbabwe for almost a year now. Your own assessment, how has its entry been in Zimbabwe? Has it provided the so-called competition that other ISPs were anticipating?
We are very happy that we've had Starlink for close to a year now. And what Starlink has done is that it has brought the much needed competition in the industry. You can see by the Potra's figures how the adoption has been. There's been a massive adoption on the number of Starlink users. So what Starlink has brought in, it has brought in a more affordable internet option, and it has also brought a faster internet option as well. But one of the biggest advantages that Starlink has is that it's brought in the much needed competition. Another big advantage that Starlink has is the ease of getting an internet connection. Back in the day, there was a long waiting list for you to get an internet connection. For someone to get an internet connection, they had to physically go to Tower 1, they had to physically go to any of the other ISPs. And they would go there, they would sign a form, and then after that, they would hope for when they would actually get an internet connection. But Starlink made it very easy to get an internet connection, because now all you had to do was to order it online from anywhere, also at any time. And also, you could make a payment. You can make a payment using a Visa card. So you do not necessarily have to be in Zim. So the diaspora people, if they wanted to get an internet connection for their family back home, they could actually make the order in the diaspora. So the ease that it brought on getting an internet connection has been very, very huge. I've helped a number of people get Starlink connections from the diaspora as well, because I'm also very active on X.
And would you say it has come with, of course, you have mentioned some of the advantages that have come with Starlink, but maybe let's look at its pricing. I know at some point it was around $200, but now it is, in places like Bulawayo, you have to pay for something like $473, subscribing for $50 a month. Would you say that is still a fair price?
Yes, it is still a fair price, because also you find that with Starlink they also brought in a number of promotions. The first one that was there was that you could buy it in installments. You could buy the equipment over 6 months, or you could buy it over 9 months. That was huge, because that was a service people never used to get. And also, when you were paying this service over 6 or 9 months, there was no increased price on the equipment. So the same price you would pay for the Mini, you'd also pay the same price over that same period of time, which was also very good. And then now, like you highlighted, the price has now gone higher. Reasons being, one of the reasons is why I'm here, to advocate for that ground station, to create that capacity, so that we won't have to pay for these additional fees, because that there are now more people using the service. And the fact that there's more people using the service, one thing that people should know about Starlink is that Starlink was meant for rural and underserved areas. It was never meant to service people in urban areas by design. But because our infrastructure and our setup for local ISPs, it now became lucrative for people to shift to using the Starlink service even in urban areas. That just tells a lot of the pricing as well as the technology that we have locally. Another point I'd like to just highlight about Starlink, another advantage, is that the service is easy to install. So anyone can install it. It's just plug and play. It's very easy. It's actually much easier than DSTV. So it's easier to get, it's easier to install, and it's also easier to make payments for. There are now quite a lot of payment options. And another big thing that it also has is that it's easy to monitor. So they've got a very good Starlink app that helps you to monitor if there's a problem, or it lets you see which devices are connected as well. So those are the other advantages. Regarding the price, that's why we need a ground station here, so that we can sort out issues of the price.
Yeah, let's talk about the ground station. How can it benefit? I know you. I follow you on X, that is Twitter, and you've been very, very vocal about Bulawayo having a ground station for Starlink. Maybe tell us more about that and why you are pushing so hard that the city gets to have a ground station here.
Okay, yes, that's a very good question. But before I get into the ground station, maybe I'll just highlight how the Starlink service works, so that people can get an appreciation of why we need a ground station. So the Starlink service, actually, I'll start off from maybe what Starlink is, because this is very important for the ground station. So Starlink is a subsidiary of SpaceX. SpaceX is owned by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the richest person in the world, right? And he owns SpaceX. So right now, currently, when you've got a Starlink device, it looks like a dish. It communicates with Starlinks directly above it. These satellites are about 500 kilometers, about 400 to 500 kilometers above the Earth. That's where their orbit is. The difference with these satellites, they used to be what was called VSAT. But with VSAT, the satellites were further away from the Earth. They're in an orbit called GEO, so they're further away, meaning that the time it takes to travel to those satellites it takes much longer. So the idea of bringing the satellites closer is to reduce the time it travels. And by reducing the time it travels, the signal travels, it means that your experience improves. But you need a lot more satellites. That's why Starlink has launched more than 9,000 satellites. This now you go back to SpaceX, because SpaceX is the vehicle that sends the Starlink satellites into orbit. And the beauty about SpaceX is that they launch these satellites almost every 2 to 3 days. They're able to do this because they've got the technology of reusability on their rockets. So that's why they're able to do that. And not only do they send rockets, not only do they send Starlink satellites, but they also send satellite communication for other providers. So the reason why they are in a low Earth orbit is to reduce the latency, so that the speed is faster on the internet. So holding on that concept of latency, once the satellite communicates with these satellites, once your dish communicates with these satellites that are closer to orbit, they need to then communicate to the ground infrastructure. I'll give an example. The internet, Starlink's internet is not in space, but the actual internet is on the ground. I'll give you an example. If you're watching soccer, that is on the ground, or we are streaming right now, we're in the ground. So this Starlink signal needs to communicate back to the ground infrastructure, because that's where the data centers are. So this is where the ground station comes in. So the ground station now receives the satellite signal, and then it converts it to fiber, and then it now goes to the servers that then you watch your live sports. So the positioning of this ground station matters on where it is. So when Starlink was first introduced in Africa, it was introduced in Nigeria a couple of years ago. But and then when other countries started getting it, they were using Nigeria for but that's where the ground station is. So if you had a terminal in Zimbabwe, you would use Nigeria or you would use Europe. And the distance is about 8,000 kilometers to Europe. So although Starlink was good, the time the signal took to get to Europe was very long. So the closer you bring the ground station, you reduce that distance, meaning that communication is now faster. So we started advocating for a ground station then, like 3 years ago. After Nigeria, the second country that got a ground station was Kenya. Once Kenya got that ground station, certain countries were now shifted to use that ground station. And Kenya is about 2,000, if I'm not mistaken, about 2,000 kilometers. So this significantly reduced the latency, and this started improving the service. After Kenya, the next country that got it was Ghana, and then after Ghana, it was Mozambique. And now the latency is now much lower. And then also Botswana also got a ground station. So right now we're using Ghana ground station, we're using Botswana ground station. So now we would like one to be in Bulawayo. Why Bulawayo? Because one, Bulawayo is strategic. Over history, Bulawayo has always been strategic from the industrialization, and it's also very close to the other borders. And there's also a project that is running now called the Paratas project, where there's a fiber cable coming from Botswana, and it's going to it's from Botswana to Bulawayo, and it's going to link to Zambia and South Africa. So Bulawayo is going to be strategic. So by putting a ground station in Bulawayo, that fiber now communicates with those cables. And also Bulawayo is much closer to South Africa, it's much closer to Botswana, and it's also much closer to the other nations. So this ground station will not only serve Bulawayo, it will serve the whole of Zimbabwe and other neighboring countries. That's why we advocate for Bulawayo, because geographically it makes sense to have a ground station in Bulawayo. Specifically, it would be nice if it could be set up at Bulawayo City Council.
So who then initiates this setting up of the ground station? Is it Bulawayo City Council? Is it government, or SpaceX themselves? They will choose a suitable location for this ground station?
Yes. So if you look at other countries, there is advocacy. Like if you look at Bangladesh, for example, Bangladesh, they actually said that for any internet traffic, it has to go through Bangladesh. So like right now, we are using a ground station in Mozambique. We're using a ground station in Botswana. But what Bangladesh did and what other countries said, they said, you know what, our data is important. Our data privacy is important. We know that we want to make sure we can see the security. And the best way to be able to make sure that a system is secure is for it to interface with our local infrastructure, so that all the data is retained here, and also it's able to interface with the local infrastructure. So it's something that comes from the government as well. So the government can actually push this to SpaceX and say, you know what, for national security, because out there many people say, no, Starlink is not secure. I actually had many people saying that no, Starlink is not secure. But a better approach is to take an approach like India or Bangladesh or other countries that say, okay, let's see how the Starlink service works. This is how we can make sure that it's secure, by having a ground station, by having a point of presence that we can manage. So it's not only a capacity issue, but it's also a national security issue, whereby we can advocate for that and say, you know what, if a ground station is here, it's more secure, but also there's benefits of capacity.
And maybe let's look at its if we were to have a ground station here, how do locals benefit from it? I know you've spoken about the issue of national security, but what are other benefits of having a ground station located here, especially for us here in Bulawayo?
Okay, so the one major benefit again is the issue of latency, which I'd covered earlier on. Because right now, for traffic, if I was to access a server like Zimbra server, or if I was to access a server locally in Zimbabwe, what it means is that my traffic first has to go to Mozambique. From Mozambique, where the ground station is, it now interfaces with the fiber. It then goes to South Africa, where there is Starlink's point of presence, and then it comes back to Zimbabwe. So it takes a longer route. But by having it in Bulawayo, what it means is that it goes from my dish directly to the ground station into the fiber, and then I'm now accessing the resources that are there. So firstly, it will make the service faster. It will also then increase capacity, because people have been complaining about capacity. This is one way it will increase capacity. If you look at countries that have that increased capacity, because before there are two countries in Africa currently that are at capacity or that have got sold out areas. One of them is Zimbabwe, Harare surrounding areas, and the other one is South Sudan. But previously, before that, there was Kenya, it was at capacity. Nairobi and Mombasa were at capacity. There was Ghana, Accra, and there were 4 places that were at capacity in Nigeria. Like I highlighted, all those places now have ground stations, and now capacity has opened up. So then it will also open up capacity. But now the other major benefit is that when a ground station is set up in Bulawayo, that ground station needs to communicate or needs to connect to fiber infrastructure. So what it means is that local ISPs, like your tel ones, your power tels, that connectivity now goes into their fiber networks, creating more revenue for these companies, and also setting up the ground station. Again, what's important is that the ground station does not need any funding from Bulawayo. Everything, most of the funding is done by SpaceX. So it's something that we just need to approve, and then we have it. And then in terms of security, and also local ISPs will benefit from that. Another benefit is that when you now have Starlink ground station, Starlink requires a huge amount of capacity. What that then does is that it won't just be serving the whole of Zimbabwe, but it also serves, it will now be serving Zambia, Malawi, Angola, DRC, and other nations. So you now need more capacity than Zimbabwe needs, meaning that's also more revenue. But what then this attracts now is that it now attracts other players. For example, your YouTubes, they now want to come in and connect close to the ground station, because the experience now becomes better when the YouTube servers are now closer to the end user. So you'll find YouTube, Netflix, Google, Meta, all these companies now, they now start coming into Bulawayo. And then this is now how we start creating economic benefits. Right now, South Africa, because of their previous infrastructure, most of those companies are located there. But then if you now have a ground station, we can now attract these companies. And then this is how you now make Bulawayo a technology hub. All this requires very little funding. And this will now allow Bulawayo to leapfrog, because when these companies come, they can now then create more employment, create also jobs, and start bringing up the digital economy, of which the digital economy is something that's very important.
Okay. But have you had maybe conversations around this issue with maybe government officials, city officials, maybe to try and make them see this big opportunity that might come our way?
Yes, that's also a good question. I have sent my proposal to Potras as well as the Ministry of ICT, and also David Coulthard also bagged the idea on X. He also had a post to say, he's ready to provide land and all the support for the ground station, because what technology does for a country or an institution is that it helps an organization to advance. And technology does it in the least. We're using very little resources in most of the cases. I'll give an example. I'll give two examples. Firstly, if you look at inbox, if you look at Simbisa, Chicken Inn, and Cream Inn, and all those companies, it was very easy for them to pivot to inbox because firstly, most of their branches, if not all their branches, already had connectivity. And for them to now introduce inbox, although they were dealing in food, but because they leveraged technology, they used the existing infrastructure, they used the existing staff, because the same person who was serving chicken in or pizza was able to now then shift into becoming a bank teller, basically. So this is what technology brings. It allows people to use existing infrastructure, existing stuff, but to make more out of that. So now when you now start bringing this technology into City Council can now start finding new revenue streams, because when you have the ground station hosted by City Council, SpaceX pays City Council, thereby generating new revenue. And then also when these companies come, your Amazons, your Huawei's, because you've set up a ground station and you've set up a conducive environment, it means that the City Council can now start offering more services. So that's the big benefits of technology, is that you can do more with less.
But what has been the uptake of Starlink, especially by government institutions? I know citizens themselves have taken up to Starlink, especially those who have disposable income. They've set up Starlink. But maybe let's look at it from the government perspective. Do you feel that the government has really taken up Starlink? Maybe around issues to do with national security, because they have been, like you said, highlighted earlier, that some people are now saying that Elon Musk and this company were able to spy into what people are doing. We don't know how secure our data is, especially if we use Starlink.
Yes, that's also that's a good question. Government has been doing well in adopting Starlink, especially through the presidential internet scheme, where we've seen that hospitals are now getting Starlink, schools are getting Starlink, ambulances are also getting Starlinks. In terms of national security, if we take the approach that Bangladesh, India, and other countries take to say, you know what, let's set up these measures, let's set up a ground station, let's set up a point of presence, that will add to the security, because as it is now, there's not much, there is control, but you will increase the security once you have these things in place. And also in adoption, I've been using a lot of buses of late, and a large portion of buses now have Starlink on them. So if you're going to Harare or if you're going to Mutare, chances are the bus that you are using will either have Starlink or either have the Econet. So it will now help you to remain connected, which is quite massive.
And maybe in closing, maybe let's look into the future. Like you've already mentioned that even like public infrastructure, some of hospitals, schools, even buses, and now taxis also, they're hooked up into Starlink, and people can actually be connected. But maybe looking ahead at the developments that come, how will that assist us as a nation in terms of our digital economy? Seeing that maybe for a long time people have been complaining about internet charges, internet connectivity, how it's sometimes it's slow, and it's there's that lag when it comes to advancements, when it comes to technology. How will technologies like Starlink actually help us as a country moving forward?
Okay, yeah, that's also a good question. what I'll also highlight is that when you look at Starlink, this is one of the best companies in terms of technology. When you look at the whole family of Elon Musk's companies, you find that from a technology point of view, Starlink is one of the best services out there. And also there's SpaceX, and also there's Tesla, and also there's all those things. So what it means is that there's an opportunity for technology transfer. By bringing in this technology, you are also then interacting with the people who then bring in the best technology. And not only the best technologies, these are the people who are also very rich. Like you look at Starlink, Elon Musk, he's a billionaire, and Zimbabwe is now open for investment. So the thing is that when you bring in technology is always evolving. So right now we're talking about Starlink, but now there's now direct to cell, where you now no longer need a dish, but from your cell phone, you can get connectivity from anywhere. But how that works now is that Starlink now works with local providers like your Econets and your Telecel to make that service available. And if you look at how technology works, the first thing that we had when Econet came in, people were only able to make calls and they were only able to send SMSs. But because you've set up this digital infrastructure, it's now easy to build services on top. So after that, you find that you can now do EcoCash. So it now means that with services like direct to cell, it means that someone anywhere now is able to do their EcoCash. After that, we found other services like there was the funeral services like EcoShow. And this is all riding on the same platform. So you'll find that when the internet was in America, when they set up connectivity initially, they didn't know about Uber. They didn't know about WhatsApp. They didn't know about Meta. They didn't know about Google. But all they knew at the time was connectivity. But after that, even AI is also still running on connectivity. So when we bring this connectivity to Bulawayo, it now then creates a platform. You're now connecting students from all over in rural and remote places. Why I touch on education is that Elon Musk's desire for Starlink started when he was doing his education and he was connected to the internet. He saw the power that connectivity or the internet has and the opportunities that it can connect educations. From there, that's where his vision for Starlink started. If you look at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg was able to start Facebook because he had an internet connection in his dome. That's very important. He had that platform. So if we can now then give our students that platform where they're now able to have that connectivity, they can now start coming up with ideas. If you look at Google, they were able to start the same service at their university. And a lot of startups are coming in from the education space, but at the bottom of all this is connectivity. And another important thing about connectivity is that it now links us to the diaspora. So there can be that technological transfer from the diaspora, and you're now connected to the world. So these are the opportunities that it brings. One thing I'll touch on, the last thing probably I'll touch on, is if you look at a service like this is now covering the digital economy. If you look at a service like InDrive, for example, right, you find that there's the physical economy where you've got all the taxis, for someone to actually, even if someone has got a license, even if they had a car, for someone to actually get into that industry, it was very difficult, right? But now what the digital economy opens up is that as long as someone has got a car, as long as someone has got a license, they are able to enter into the digital market, into the digital economy. The beauty of the digital economy, there's no nepotism, there is no limit. Like right now on YouTube, there's no limit on the number of people who can set up their videos or who can set up their podcasts. In Drive, there's no limit on the number of cars or drivers that can actually get into the sector. So what the digital economy now then brings is that there is now more opportunities for basically anyone at a very small entry level. If you are in Madlambuzi, as long as you've got an internet connection, you can now then set up a YouTube and you can now start sharing your experiences. So that's what the digital economy brings. And also, if you look at in-drivers, people who do in-drive, they are able to work at any time that they want. They can work between 8 and 12, they can work between the evening. So, there's that flexibility and they're able to do other things. And we are saying that our youth are not employed. And for the quickest way to install, to have these youth employed is to have such platforms where there is no limit on the number of people you can connect, and that's the advantages that the digital economy brings.
But maybe let's also look. Lastly, you talk a lot about digital advancement, but in our country we have had challenges with our public infrastructure. We're talking about roads. We're talking about connectivity, especially in the rural areas, electricity challenges, water challenges. But how can that assist in terms of us getting that to that level where people, even if you're in the rural community, can set up your business that is online based and you're able to make money from it without having to face these electricity challenges, water challenges, poor roads and everything.
Yes, this is where the partnerships now come in. Like this Starlink can be viewed as a partnership that the government took. And Starlink came and they also had to approve them. So they had this partnership. And just by an approval, the whole of Zimbabwe was connected. If we had tried to connect the whole of Zimbabwe without Starlink, it was going to be very costly, one, and it was going to take a lot of time. So we now need to have similar partnerships, whether it be Starlink or with other players. If you look at Starlink, one of the companies that they have is Tesla, and they also provide energy. So by having this ground station, we are opening up communication. We've got lithium. Right? We've got many natural resources that are in high demand. We can now then start having more of these partnerships. I recently saw an article where they were saying there's quite a lot of projects for Mat South regarding energy. And this is through ZIDA with partnerships. So I think if we can have more partnerships similar to Starlink, like what I'm pushing for Bulawayo, that if we get a ground station, that's one partnership. On top of that ground station, we can start having more partnerships. And now what technology does is that technology, if you embrace technology, it will now help you to leapfrog and to catch up with other, or even advance in front of other countries or even territories, to actually be a leader if you leverage technology. We look at back in the days, there was BMW, those were the big car manufacturers or the known brands. But now you're seeing newer companies that have leveraged technologies like your Teslas and your BYDs. They've leveraged technologies. And now they started with no cars, but because they leverage technologies, they're now actually surpassing those people who've been in the game for a long time. So the beauty about technology is that even if you're starting from the beginning, if you embrace technology, Zimbabwe, we just embraced Starlink, and now we're already advancing. So if Bulawayo embraces technology, we can now then leapfrog and become a tech leader by embracing technology.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shoko, for talking to us about Starlink and why Bulawayo stands to benefit if we are to establish a Starlink ground station here in the city. Hopefully next time we have a similar conversation when actually a ground station has been set up in the city. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the CITE View on Asake Online. My name is Leslie Moore. In today's program, we're discussing Starlink and why Bulawayo stands to benefit if we are to have a Starlink ground station here in the city. And my guest was Mr. Willard Shoko. Let's meet again in the next edition of the CITE View.